7,000.
As we move through them,
We're on
we're on D5.
5,000 series.
Yes. And
Well, we actually have staffers here with Marlon, the first couple on chronic absence and truancy, the next group with Carrie Mills, right up to the very last two, which are, again, Marlon Sumter, child abuse prevention, reporting, and suspension and expulsion due process.
okay, shall we just
So we
go
have the
down the
experts
line
in
and
the room.
see who has comments beginning at the beginning?
I can start on page 2. That's where my first comment is.
All right, let's look at page 2.
And this is on, the board shall appoint members of the district SARB. And
We don't have
we
a
don't,
SARB.
well, so, Mr. Sumter, I think you need a mic on this one. Even when we did have a SARB, I don't think that the board created that SARB. So my question to you is, what should we be doing about this?
Well, I think that is CSBA suggested language, not necessarily a requirement. In my experience, I have not encountered the situation where the board actually appointed SARB members to the local SARB, the district SARB. So I really, it's up to you, I think, what you wish to do in terms of that. If and when we are able to get the SARB going again, which is a goal anyway, if you wish to be involved in that appointment process, then certainly we would do that. But I don't think it's a requirement unless it's in the policy.
Well, I'll go ahead and look up Ed Code on that since it refers to it specifically, and I'll do that as we're looking on. But because I think that we are required to have a SARB. So it's not, we may not, we don't have a functional SARB, but it's legally not an option for us not to have one. Correct?
Right, there is no SARB in place at this point. It's in the development stages.
Okay. And let me just, so that's my comment on 5113.1. I don't know if other people have comments on that one.
What's the prognosis for having a SARB?
Well, the prognosis is good. You know, the question still remains, what's the prognosis for follow-up, you know, with the district attorney in terms of what can be done after the SARB process if it's not effective.
I was quite disappointed, I have to say, to hear that the district attorney had said there would not be support from them on that front, because that had been something I thought had been offered previously.
We understood that as well. We thought that that was a campaign pledge.
Right. Yeah, and, you know, obviously from the letter, it's a budgetary issue for them as well, although I did understand from the letter that it's more or less prosecution of habitual truants with some provision possibly for chronically absent students, which is also addressed in the policy. There are two different situations.
So, I'm sorry, which one is the one that they might pursue?
Chronic absentees, because the habitually truant process, SARB process, and prosecution process addresses the student. Chronically absent students process addresses the parent.
Parent. Well, we should definitely follow up on that, and I'm sure you are.
Yeah, well, we definitely will. And I wanted to finish my comment about campaign pledges because, you know, we've all pledged to maintain our effective educational programs, and when we're faced with huge budgetary problems at the hands of the state, then we have to pull back on some of those as well. So we know that the county's in deep trouble financially.
Can I ask a question on page? On page 7, section 5, subsection B, it limits that subsection B to K to 8. Is there a reason 9 to 12 is not included?
That's the provision made through law. It
So
only
what do we do with chronically truant students in 9 to 12?
Well, it would be hopeful that you could address them as the habitual truant, and because of, I believe, this is my interpretation of the issue, that students at that age would be addressed through the habitually truant process, the SARB process that way, rather than the parents of the younger age students.
So the parents are not involved in 9 to 12?
They can be and should be, obviously, because they are the parent. But as far as any kind of prosecution follow-up with the district attorney, it would be addressed more through habitually truant student rather than the chronically absent student, which involves a parent directly.
Sorry.
Ms. Limon.
I actually just wanted clarification on section 4. So now that the DA is not going to be involved, what does this actually look like? We don't know.
Well, depending on how much involvement, I mean, I'm not saying, and I don't think that they would be completely uninvolved. Our process would certainly be initiated at the school site through different contacts and meetings with the families and students there, with the possibility of ultimately a referral to a SARB hearing internally, a SARB process. Then at that point, a referral could be made to the DA, but it kind of, without the support there, it sort of binds our hand on what next steps we have.
So in some of the meetings that we've gone to, there's a restorative justice group in Santa Barbara. Could that be a specific intent of ours prior to going to 4?
Well, I guess, I mean, my understanding of restorative justice.
There's like a nonprofit in town, right? That
Right.
has a
Yes.
program.
Yes.
Mhm.
And but I'm not certain that it's something that's designed to address truancy or attendance issues versus conflict or some kind of, let's just, for example, physical conflict or a theft of something from students, and then the restorative justice between the two, the victim and the perpetrator. Whereas this is truancy and attendance is an individual issue with the students and parents.
Yeah, that's pretty
I guess I'd
different.
have to understand restorative justice a little more if it would be effective for this sort of thing or not.
I don't think so. I don't think it applies in this particular kind of case. Because this is really, and I mean, and from what I've heard back when the SARB was in effect, it sometimes was very effective about,
Can be.
just a one-on-one conference about what are the needs, and so many things would come out
Mhm.
about why the student was not attending school.
Right.
And it wasn't,
And the members of that SARB panel can be critical, too, to help with that. Certainly making some connections immediately at the SARB hearing is helpful.
well, I think I'm starting to understand what's going on in past practice, because the code is actually mostly focuses on the county SARB. And I think what we had in place before was not a local district SARB, but was a county SARB. I mean, I certainly know that it was chaired by Fred Razzo, and that it had, so I'm wondering, was there a dissolution of the county SARB? So the county SARB no longer exists?
I don't know the history, but I agree with you. We did have a wider area SARB, and I don't know whether Fred Razzo, for instance, was the chair of our SARB or whether that was the county committee. You're probably right. It probably was a county committee.
According to Ed Code, a county SARB is set up by the county superintendent and their Board of Education, and we would appoint a local member for them to adopt. But local districts can have local SARBs if they're in the absence of a county
Right.
SARB. So, I mean, given that, I guess leaving the language the way that it is fine with me. And also, SARBs are not mandatory. It's may. So,
Yeah, it is worth noting, though, that despite the language here, and for instance, the fourth truancy, where we're notifying, parole officers, and the county just isn't funded. They don't have enough people to even cover these students, unless they already have terms and conditions.
So is it?
So then, sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
So then nothing happens. I mean, unless they have something else.
If they
But if
have-
it's based on truancy alone,
Right.
we don't really have a mechanism to deal with it, just on truancy alone. If they don't have any other,
We can notify them they do not
But
have
that's,
caseworkers that can follow up on it.
Right.
And it's simply a fiscal issue at the county.
okay.
So in your discussion about resurrecting SARB, is that looking towards the county as being,
No.
It would be
I'm looking
our
at
own
having
local
a
SARB.
local, a district SARB.
okay. So by leaving the language here, we're setting the stage for the existence of that, but currently we're promising something we don't have, or at least the implication is.
Right, it's
That's okay,
projected.
though. It's
Yeah.
projected.
Yeah,
to the plan.
okay, all right.
Do these policies give you guidelines good enough to establish a program, universal program followed by all of our schools in this district as relates to truancy?
Yes, I mean, well, there's enough here in terms of working towards a SARB process that we can use universally in our school programs. We can establish our own specific steps prior to this SARB process that hopefully will correct the issue before it gets to this. And there are some of those things in place right now that are being used.
Yeah, because there's a lot of money at stake to keep kids in school.
Yeah, yes.
And so I want to make sure we have a policy and a practice that's universal, easy to understand, with a effort to keep children in school, not to penalize them because they don't go to school, but a process that helps in each stage to find out why they're not in school and to get them to go to school.
Right, and that is the design right now, to address those issues early on, rather than being punitive, be, more supportive and proactive in finding out what the issues are.
I don't want to get to the fourth stage.
Pardon me?
I don't want to get to the fourth stage. I want to.
Yeah.
Ms. Limon?
So along those lines, are we at any point going to hear from you on what some of those things are that are in place? Because I guess that for me, I'm just looking and reading this policy, and, 4 doesn't exist, and then I don't know how we address it.
Sure, I mean, I'd be happy to share with you what is being done now at the school sites, whether it be now or sometime in the future.
Yeah, I think we'd all like to hear that, but maybe today
Yeah, not
we need to
today.
focus on other things.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other questions on that particular AR policy? I'd like to, in the interest of time, move forward here, but on page 12 of Board Policy 5141, this is something I think I asked for once before, and so I remembered it. At the very bottom of page 12, where it talks about administering medication on campus, we offer the option of a parent or guardian to designate someone other than an employee, but someone other than a family member or guardian to administer medication, but we don't ask for the district to be released from liability on that. So I would like to add a number 4, which would be at the very bottom of the page 12, which takes the language from number 2 in the item prior that says, release the district and
Release of.
school personnel from civil liability if the student suffers an adverse reaction as a result of, and then instead of the words that follow, include something along the lines of, as a result of medication administered by an individual designated by a parent/guardian who is not an employee of the district. I just want to make sure that we're releasing ourselves from liability if some person who's not an employee and not a parent administers medication.
Would you please state that again?
Sure. Okay, so we're taking
Yeah,
the
right.
subject,
Yeah, just go ahead and read it.
okay, I'm going to read the whole thing. Okay, so it starts with the language of number 2, which is there's like 4 number 2s on this page. You know which one I mean?
Yes.
Okay.
right.
Release
Release
the
the district
and school personnel from civil liability if the student suffers an adverse reaction as a result of
Good.
medication administered
Got it.
by an individual designated by a parent/guardian who is not an employee of the district. Or maybe it should be an individual who's not an employee of the district. Do I have a misplaced modifier there? To an individual.
Okay, I've got that.
You know what, Brian, probably, sorry, it should say by an individual who is not an employee of the district who has been designated by a parent or guardian, just to make sure it's clear who is not an employee, whether it's the parent or the administering individual. Ms. Limon?
So on the same page, and I actually wanted to get board feedback on this, I was thinking of adding something else because I've heard of this happening. Something along the lines of parent also consents to restricting medication is consumed by only his or her child. I have heard of students giving other students their medication, and so I'm wondering if we can add like a third bullet point right there. So after release, the district.
Okay, so what is the?
Consents to restricted medication is only consumed by his or her child. But I'm open to changing the language there. Do you see what I'm trying?
I see what you're trying to say.
So I'm trying to figure out how to say.
Might not be consent, but it,
I think that the one thing that I want to be careful about is that this is just about the asthma medication and epinephrine. So.
Dr. Sarvis, would we typically ask a parent to, promise isn't the right word, but stipulate that the medication is not to be shared, or is that something?
No, we don't typically, no, we just assume that.
I wouldn't assume. I mean, it happened when I was in school all the time. So.
So maybe stipulate is the right
Yeah.
word.
Maybe,
then.
yeah.
Stipulate.
Stipulate that medication will not be shared.
There you go.
Okay, as we move forward, are there other suggestions, questions in the 5,000 series?
Oh, yeah. Page 30 for me. On number 11, this is for Mr. Sumter, disrupted school activities or otherwise willfully defied the valid authority of supervisors, teachers, admin, other school officials. This is under grounds for suspension and expulsion. And disrupting school activities is such a really broad category. And I know that a lot of it would be put down to suspension instead of expulsion. But this, for example, would give teachers the authority to suspend from a classroom for chewing gum. Or,
I guess, suppose there's potential for that.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
and I know that you
For a
can't.
defiance issue, obviously, if there's rules for them to not chew gum in class, then it would be more of a defiance and disruption.
Uh-huh. But that would mean that it could be grounds for suspension. And I just want to be clear that sometimes it can seem like things that you wouldn't normally want to send kids away for and have an alternative discipline means, but,
If I could clarify a little bit too on that, that would be considered a teacher's suspension from the classroom, not necessarily a home suspension.
Right.
And for the secondary school level, that would be for that classroom only, not for the entire day kind of thing.
and then for me, the next section is page 37. I don't know if anybody has anything before then.
I do. On page 30, mechanical, number 13, italicized imitation firearm, and number 17, italicized hazing.
Okay.
And then for number 18, I was wondering if we could include a terrorist threat includes any written, electronic, or oral statement by a person.
Sorry, which number is that?
18 on page 30.
Say it again?
Just add the word electronic after written and include a comma after written.
If I could interject on that a little bit too, I'm wondering if that need to check that specific ed code language that's inserted there, and
Oh.
can we, or do we want to add anything to that? I'm assuming that that particular definition
Is ed code's
specific to
definition.
ed code language.
So if it is, then maybe after the definition, we can add a line, this also includes electronic communication.
Well, it may include, we may want it to include electronic communication.
If we state it as a separate
But ed
sentence
co-
because we want to include it, then the reference would stand, and then our sentence would also stand.
Would it, though? I mean, are we allowed to?
Well, it's not
Sure.
superseding, right? It's just supplemental.
There is ed code that specifically addresses the use of electronic means for harassment, intimidation, and threats. I believe it's 48900T. Could be off on that a little bit, but recent legislation within the past year or two specifically entered that because of the influx or the elevation of that sort of thing.
So then we could add both citations and insert the word electronic.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Or, like was mentioned, to add a note that addresses it by the other ed code. Add an additional note.
Well, let me.
Which one did you think it might be?
I'm thinking I was thinking T, but I could be wrong with that.
Well,
Yeah, it's not, and 48900.7, you see, if you think it's under 48900 itself?
He said 913, didn't he?
I thought he said 900.
Oh, I thought he said 48913.
Well, on the next page, it defines electronic, but I don't see it, and it's 32261.
well, if, for number 18, if the board desires to include electronic, may I suggest simply that we have Marlon Sumter work with legal counsel to figure out how to include electronic in that?
I would be okay with that.
Yeah.
Okay. That seems like an efficient way to handle that.
And then going back one page just before we jump over, on page 28, the first one, the first comment, the first bullet point, we refer to governing board, but everywhere else we refer to Board of Education. So if we can change that from governing board to Board of Education.
I'm sorry, where is it?
In number 1, page 28, AR 5144.1.
I bet that's in the ed code too.
Probably.
If it's in the ed code, keep it, but
Well,
I,
it-
48925.
the iPad is coming in very handy.
I know.
Once I turn off the screen, okay. For the length of day prescribed by the governing board.
Okay.
Okay, then,
Okay. Looks like we'll keep it then.
yeah.
do you want to insert of education?
I don't think we need to. I think
Okay,
we know
fine.
who we are.
All right, moving forward.
Okay, so it was page 37 on AR 5144.1, and it ties to page 42, sort of page 41, 42. And the issue is that we've been getting so many delays in our expulsions. And my question for Mr. Sumter is are the delays coming forward around stipulated agreements? Or is
No.
it really about the expulsion hearing process? Because I feel like a lot of the ones that we've seen are stipulated agreement delays that have taken months and months for the stipulated agreement to come to us, but I'm not sure if I'm missing something on the hearing side, so I want to.
No, it's not from the hearing process side of things. We're pretty good with our hearing process. The issue has really come up on the right that the parent has to, or family has to request a postponement, and then that being done through an attorney then is negotiated by counsel on both sides. And there have been changes in council in terms of the expulsion hearings that have delayed that process even further, and interpretations by council that have delayed it further than really necessary.
So it sounds like in both this section, then on page 37, and then I'm going to address it again when we get to the stipulated agreement alternative, that one problem may be that any subsequent postponement may be granted at the board's discretion. And that's obviously Ed Code language, but I think we need to articulate that we have, that we need these to come forward more quickly, and we need to do it here in the policy. And I don't know if anybody has some suggested language for right there. The request for postponement shall be in writing.
Have we ever given permission for a postponement?
And it's never come to us for a postponement. It's always been the
Right, and this actually
designee.
has been addressed with council this week. Both sides. In terms of the initial postponement request is their right for up to 30 days. It has come to light that in many cases opposing counsel interpret that as at least 30 days. And that just came to light this week when an additional request for postponement on a new case came forward, and they requested for at least 30 days postponement, and we called them to task and said, no, Ed Code says up to, or no more than 30 days. And so we're holding tight to that now. I have a conference with council for the district related to that, and their interpretation of that is identical to what I just explained to you. So we're all on the same page with that.
May I suggest language that says any subsequent postponement may be granted at the board's discretion but is discouraged?
I think so, because I think we need to signal that in our policy, and I'm appreciative that you're now, Mr. Sumter, enforcing this and getting the word out, because clearly it's, it's a situation we don't want to reoccur.
And then tying in with that, for the stipulated agreements, I mean, the whole point of a stipulated agreement was to get a student quickly into their alternative educational setting, and to avoid, in very obvious cases, them having to go through a painful expulsion hearing process. And yet now we have stipulated agreements coming to us literally months and months and months after the actual event. And then it's lost all purpose in that case. And I would suggest that we put a timeline on stipulated agreements, and that they must be finalized and approved by the board within something like 30 school days after I'm trying to get back to the original egg. After the principal or superintendent or designee determines that one of the acts listed under grounds for suspension and expulsion has occurred. And my question is that enough time? Is that, they have a week, once a stipulated agreement has been put together, they have a week to reconsider or decide whether or not they're going to sign it. But is something like 30 school days?
I personally think that's realistic. What we have found that many times parents avoid the issue with their own attorney and getting signatures. And many times there's incarceration involved to get a hold of the student. Now, the stipulation agreements do state that the by and through the parent, the student agrees to these things. So it's my understanding that we could actually accept a stipulation without the student's signature because it's being done by and through the parent for the minors.
Well, I would suggest, I mean, this is essentially a courtesy and a nice option for students. If they can't get it done within 30 days, they might as well go through the expulsion process. So I would suggest that we put a deadline on it.
And where would you insert that? Top of page 42?
Yes, where it says
end?
all stipulated agreements are subject to final approval by the board. Stipulated agreements must be finalized and approved by the board within 30 school days after the principal or superintendent or designee determines that one of the acts listed under grounds for suspension and expulsion has occurred.
Can I suggest a different language on that?
Mhm.
Rather than finalized and approved, would it be better to say acted on by the board?
Okay.
Because it may not be approved.
Must be, okay. Finalized
Presented for action?
For board action.
and presented for board approval.
Board approval or board action?
Sorry, board
Action.
action. I guess trying to just make it more complicated. Presented for board action.
So stipulated agreements must be presented for board action within 30 days,
Within 30 school days is what I had.
30 school days. And you were referring to other language.
Yeah, then it's after,
After.
which is the beginning of this one here, after.
Just point at it and I'll pull
Yeah.
it out.
So it's page 37, this language starting here.
Got it. Thank you.
Would there ever be an issue with getting that to the board in a timely fashion within that 30-day window?
I'd say right now there'd be lots of issues with it.
Yeah. I guess it partially would depend on where the actual board date falls. And if we give them a window to get the signatures, then all, certainly Ed Code requires some action, at least as far as a hearing goes, within 30 days.
And that was that one of the reasons why I was pushing it towards 30 days was that if it turns out that we can't come to some sort of agreement, then they need to have an expulsion hearing, and it seems like it shouldn't fall
Right,
outside.
and we would have to either have it finalized within 10 days prior to that 30 days, so within 20 days, or notify the families before those 10 days that it is going to hearing. So they have to have received notice 10 days prior to the hearing that there's going to be a hearing. So I guess the procedure we would then follow would be to hopefully have the agreement signed and in hand before the 20 days is up, or schedule a hearing, and then if we get the stipulation before the 30 days, pull it off the docket, pull the hearing off the docket.
I'm just wondering, I'm thinking to myself, if you have to have it in your hands by 20 days, but it could have happened right after a board meeting, so it could conceivably be, 2 weeks before our next meeting.
Right.
Does it then make sense to make it more like 35 days for us? Stipulated agreement must be presented for board action within 35 school days?
Yeah,
I mean-
that would give us some buffer there for the timing of things.
All right, let's make,
Question on that.
Mr. Heron?
You're saying you have to have it in this, ready for us to put on the agenda within 35 days, not for us to take action within 35 days?
presented for board action.
Okay, so they could present it today, and we might get it on the agenda in 2 weeks. So are you saying it should be on the agenda within,
That was kind of where I was
Okay.
going to.
You want it
So-
to be placed on an agenda within
But
30 days?
But being placed on agenda is not the same thing as having the meeting. Is that what you're getting at?
no, I want to know what the 35 days, when does it, are you encompassed?
I
in
was
the
thinking that's the board meeting where we see it.
Yeah, but that, sometimes like in July and December poses a problem, because we've got 30 days between meetings. And they might come to the approval, Monday of this week. We had a board meeting, there won't be again for another 2 weeks before we have a board meeting, but we may have had it in our hands, next Monday.
We,
There's no way to get it on our,
right.
Tuesday's agenda.
We might have to limit it to signing the agreement. I mean, I know that undermines your desire to get it to us quickly, but signing the stipulated agreement within 30 days. I'm also a little concerned about the legal position on this, and I don't know if we need to clarify it, but there may be some reason why we can't enforce that kind of a deadline. I'm not sure.
I couldn't answer
I don't
that
think there
question
is,
for
because
sure.
stipulated agreements are strictly up to a district to whether they
Yeah.
even offer them.
Okay.
That's true.
And stipulated agreement, okay, so this would be my suggested language then. Stipulated agreements must be signed and delivered to the district within 30 days. within 30 school days and be presented for action at the board, at the next board meeting, at the subsequent board meeting, something like that.
The next regularly scheduled.
At the next regularly scheduled board meeting, thank you.
Regularly scheduled board meeting include a special meeting, we wouldn't have to have one on the agenda.
I don't want us to have to create a special meeting.
No,
So
I
I would
know
say,
that.
you know what, I would say regularly scheduled. Yeah, why not? We can just keep it that way.
I suppose we could always make an exception. If we had a special meeting and it came up sooner, then I'm sure we could make an exception.
If we had one that was pending and we wanted to do it this morning.
Can you repeat that? One
Okay.
last time, I'm sorry.
So it says instead, all stipulated agreements must be signed and presented to the district. Is that what I said? before?
Delivered, you said delivered
Okay, and
earlier.
delivered to the district within 30 school days, and will be presented for board action presented for action at the next regularly scheduled board meeting.
Got it.
And
Or
Mr.
I
Heron, is
could
that
take off-
okay with you? I mean,
I
we
can
could-
take out regularly scheduled, so it's just at the
At the
next board
board
meeting.
meeting.
But then it means that we would have to put it on a special meeting agenda.
And I hate to be nitpicky,
Yeah.
but we might get it on a Monday, and the next meeting is Tuesday, we can't do it, because it's not agendized.
I think that holds true for any case where we says regularly scheduled board meeting. It's the
Okay.
understanding that it has to be within the parameters of the Brown Act.
And I assume that you want to retain the language within 30 school days after the superintendent or
Yes,
designee
yeah.
determines that one or more of the acts listed under grounds for suspension and expulsion has occurred and will be presented for action at the next regularly scheduled board meeting.
Yes.
Okay?
Okay,
And-
good. When we have challenges, we find opportunity, and that's a good example of that.
And then for me, the next one is on just a question on page 44 on the readmission after expulsion. Ed Code says that they need to be coming to the board, and we don't see readmissions, and so I'm fine. Obviously, the language that's in here is accurate and reflects Ed Code, but I feel like we need council direction on what we actually need to be doing as a board, as opposed to what we can designate to a representative of the district.
I can say that, in my experience, the reentries have never gone back to the board. And I don't know that that is necessarily a requirement of Ed Code so much as a board policy.
Well, Ed Code says what we see here. That the superintendent or designee shall transmit to the board his or her recommendation regarding readmission. The board shall reconsider this recommendation in closed session. And so, the board may deny readmission. I would really like district council to let us know what we should be doing around this piece.
Okay.
That makes good sense.
All right, so that sounds like 5144.1 we won't deal with today, but we will ask to come back.
No, I mean, I think we do need to adopt it as it stands, because this is Ed Code language. And I'm happy to go ahead and approve the 5144.1 with the changes that we've made. But in addition to that, I'd like a separate interpretation from our district council on what district practice can be as opposed to what Ed Code says.
Okay, so maybe that could come to us in a board brief.
So,
That'd be
well,
Okay.
we'd go ahead with the approval today. We'd bring either cleanup language back at a future meeting, or we'd just bring this back to you with an explanation in the board brief. And I'll just, I'll put it on the list of future agenda items right now.
Thank you. Okay, any other, Ms.
Well, and I will
Mr. Moore?
actually just note, I'll just give Dr. Sarvis the list, but that I am recommending certain mechanical changes consistent to the other ones on pages 31, 33, 35, 38. And I'll just hand it.
Okay, thank you for doing that.
I'm going to move that we waive the second reading and approve the board policies and administrative regulations in the 5,000 series as revised.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. D6, first reading of selected board policies and administrative regulations in the 6,000 series.
Let me just catch my notes here for a moment here.
My first comment on that is on page 1.
Mrs. Parker?
That's on the academic standards. And everything in here I see is true. District content standards for English language arts, et cetera. Meet or exceed statewide model content standards adopted by the State Board of Education. Obviously, the State Board of Education has adopted the Common Core. It just feels strange not to have any mention of the Common Core in this board policy. And I don't know how my fellow board members feel about it, or if Dr. White wants to weigh in. But I don't know if there needs to be, or if it would be helpful to have a sentence that says,
We've adopted.
or exceed statewide, or exceed the Common Core national standards, or the Common Core standards adopted by the State Board of Education. So that instead of the statewide model content standards, that it would change over to the Common Core.
So it would say the
But-
National Common
But
Core?
it would say the statewide model content standards and the Common Core standards, because I have to say that, of course, Common Core doesn't include many pieces that are there. Dr. White, do you have any opinion on that?
My comment would be that the state has adopted the Common Core, plus they've added the California 15%. So I think that's what's understood in this, if you will, because it's already been adopted by the state. So there is the extra 15% that we've added as California.
Right. So may I suggest that we shall meet or exceed the statewide model content standards and Common Core standards adopted by the State Board of Education? It's just called the Common Core standards, right? I'm not missing any other.
Common Core state standards.
And the Common Core state standards adopted by the State Board of Education.
That'll make us very current. We can look back on this in a few years and realize, and wonder where we are then, I suspect. Any other additions?
Is it right here?
I have a question on page 2. About 1/3 of the way down, it says the superintendent or designee shall annually communicate the applicable standards to the students. How is that communicated? Is it letter or is it via? I'm just curious.
Generally speaking, that the communication comes from the teacher.
The teacher.
Yeah, the teacher, when they do back to school night.
Back to school night. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
And then it's built into the report card as well.
correct, and it's on our website.
Okay. Mrs. Parker?
My next one is on page 5, AR 6115, ceremonies and observances, under patriotic exercises. The second sentence, well, the first sentence says each school shall conduct patriotic exercises daily, and that is an ed code. Then the next sentence says these patriotic exercises shall consist of the reciting of the Pledge of Allegiance. That's actually not in ed code. Ed code says that if you conduct the Pledge of Allegiance, then that shall count as your patriotic exercise, but it doesn't have to be. And I'm going to suggest that we change shall to may, simply because, and especially in our secondary schools, there are a lot that are not doing the Pledge of Allegiance daily, that sometimes they're doing it 3 times a week, and on the other 2 days, they're showing brief clips about some, patriotic, historical event or activity. And so I think that the wording should reflect district practice.
We can certainly do that. What we found was that while that language has been in place, we consistently find that nothing is being done. So we said, well, then we're going to give the pledge every day.
But that's not happening either. So.
Well, I asked specifically Ms. Waske about this issue not too long ago, and she did a survey and came back to me and said it is being done, and she even gave me the ed code that said it has to be done. So I'm sort
You
of,
can look at the ed code that says, that makes it clear that each school shall conduct patriotic exercises daily, and I'd be happy to look it up for you.
yeah, I'd like, because she sent me the ed code that reaffirmed that it had to be done. So I'm surprised to
No.
hear that it doesn't.
I assume she was probably referring to this ed code language.
And this is not ed code language, this is
Oh,
CSBA
she might have been
language.
looking
Yes.
at our policy.
No, she sent me the ed code. I'm positive she sent me the ed code.
And I'll pull it up.
Because that's how I satisfied a parent who was complaining.
Because I didn't ask Ms. Sawaski, I asked the principals. And at one of them, Dos Pueblos, for example, they're struggling because they don't have a, no, they have flags at Dos Pueblos.
Some don't.
They don't have a, they don't have a.
Oh, the
The intercom system,
The
thank
intercom.
you. And so they've been kind of doing things on a homeroom by homeroom basis. A couple of the junior highs do the pledge 3 days a week, and they do 2 days a week an alternative patriotic exercise. So what it says is, in every public elementary school each day during the school year, at the beginning of the first regularly scheduled class or activity period, at which the majority of the pupils of the school normally begin the school day, there shall be conducted appropriate patriotic exercises. The giving of the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America shall satisfy the requirements of this section. And what that means is, and I was looking at the ACLU website on it, is that if you do that, that shall count as your patriotic exercise. You don't have to do anything else in addition to it. But, and sorry, I said the code for elementary, but it's reflected for secondary as well immediately following, and it doesn't change. That you can choose that if you do the Pledge of Allegiance, then that will count for your patriotic exercise, but you have to do some patriotic exercise every day. So because we have different practices across the district, but they all are doing a patriotic exercise of some kind, and they are following ed code, then I would suggest that we change shall to may.
And I won't vote yes for that. I need to do more study.
And I can also, hold on a second. I can give you the CSBA actual language because they put a note on this as well. But this will take me a moment to come up. So if you
Okay.
want to move on to anybody's next interest or concern.
Ms. Limon?
So it's not in this section, it's page 10, and it's BP 6145. And I'm just curious why, on the top of page 10, why that was taken out. The superintendent or designee. Sorry, the superintendent or designee may grant ineligible students a probationary period of not more than one semester, et cetera.
Page 10 or page 9?
Ms. Limon, that was an error, and so we replaced it. So that next page should actually be the replacement with that not taken out.
Got
That
it.
was
Okay.
just an error. I'm sorry.
Thank you. No, thank you.
Well, while Mrs. Parker is looking that up, I'm happy to go back and talk a little bit about the patriotic exercise piece. It's my understanding from talking to principals and teachers that currently it's true that they're alternating the pledge if they choose to with other patriotic exercises. And I had one teacher tell me she thought it was more meaningful for the students not to just say it almost rotely every day, but to reflect more on it if it was interspersed with other patriotic exercises, because she thought it gave it more weight when it was done in that manner. So I don't know if we want to get feedback from other people or not on this one, but I thought the current practice, from what I've learned talking to people, seemed to be working for them.
I have a question about that. What are other alternatives that we're hearing about? What else are they doing in lieu of
Sometimes
that?
the teacher might put a quote on the board from a founder, or they might play clips from videos, or they might even sing a patriotic song. So, I think there are a number of things that they can do and that they have done. Mr. Heron,
I'm
do you want to talk a little bit more about
Yeah,
what
you're
your
going
position?
to, you're going to open up a can of worms that I don't think we need another group of parents unhappy with us. I mean, that's just, there's nobody unhappy at the moment, but I can tell you, as soon as you change that from may to shall, you're going to have a segment of the society, on top of us. And I don't think we need to invite that kind of activity. And I think this is the expectation, and I want to find out why I got one answer, and I'm going to make sure I got that one answer. I'll go back and look at my emails, but I want to see what I found out when I did request it before I make it, because my memory is one thing, and what you're telling me is totally different. And I just want to find out for sure.
And I'm sorry, the internet is being a little slow right now. It's very slowly trying to come up on 6144
So-
and having a really hard time. But
I think we should just postpone 6115.
I mean, 60, oh, sorry, is it 61?
Yes.
15.
No wonder it's confused.
Ms. Avon?
What if we keep these patriotic exercises shall consist of the reciting of the Pledge of Allegiance and/or include instruction that promotes understanding of the concepts of the pledge?
And that's another way you could do the same thing?
And we keep shall, and it just says and/or, and takes may also. And it gives folks,
And I think that
An
might be
opportunity.
what CSBA recommends if this policy ever pops up.
how do you feel about that, Mr.
No,
Mayor?
I don't want to take away
Okay.
the mandatory nature of it until I do more research. Especially in 1 through 6.
Mhm.
And I suggest we just, while we're waiting, let's not wait for the internet,
Yeah.
keep going.
Okay.
Let's see.
All right, well, are there any other items, questions for discussion in the 6,000 series here?
Yes. I have some on page 14. I don't know if anybody has anything before then? No?
I have page 16, but.
Okay. On page 14, there is a parentheses. Well, there's a couple of things. Under course loads, it says, all students may be continuously enrolled each semester in a minimum of 3 academic subjects. And then I think there's a dash that says English, math, science, foreign language. I would just mechanically change that dash and put a comma, say, including.
Including or, English, math, science, foreign language, or social studies?
Yes. Then, under number 1 there, where it says, there's a parentheses that says San Marcos High School, San Marcos High may have additional requirements / opportunities. I would simply delete that.
I had a question about that myself, because we know that at San Marcos, they don't necessarily have 3 academic subjects each semester. And so phrasing it as a requirement or an opportunity seemed like the wrong way to do it. Do we not want to address the fact that there potentially are less than those 3 at San Marcos?
I would, first of all, I think I would want to say block schedule schools instead of San Marcos.
Mhm.
And then I wouldn't want to call it additional requirements and opportunities, but I didn't come up with better language for it.
I know, we might say block schedule schools may vary for,
Schools
We have-
on the block schedule may vary.
Schools on the block schedule may have different requirements.
yeah,
Let's put it that way.
or varying, yeah.
And then on number 1, all students must be continuously enrolled in a full schedule as determined by each school during the regular school day. And then just put including, where it says if minimum, which I think is just a mistake, I would say just including 6 credit earning courses. Because typically we don't want to encourage
The minimum.
7, for example.
I'm sorry, I was catching the last change. Would you please repeat that?
So on
Yeah.
number 1, where under number 1,
All
it'd be
students
comma.
must be?
Yeah, there would be
Yes.
comma, including 6 credit earning courses, delete the if minimum.
I had a question on the bottom of page 14, under college classes number 1, where it says students must be enrolled in a full school schedule as defined by each school. Students attending college classes must be enrolled in a minimum of our district classes at the high school.
And
Could someone
I-
explain that to me?
I wanted to change that to student must be enrolled in a full schedule as defined by education code, and not by each school. Because you don't have to be taking 6 classes at Santa Barbara High if you're taking 1 class at community college. So it should be by education code.
So is this saying, I agree,
Mhm.
is this also saying then that in order to attend college classes, you have to be in a minimum number of classes at the high school? Dr. White, is that
I
correct?
think that this is about the ADA, because it has to do with the number of minutes that a student needs to be in school for us to receive ADA for that student. So I think that's perhaps what Mrs. Parker was referring to in terms of ed code requirements. To meet ADA, I think that's what we're specifically referring to. Because a dual enrollment course assumes that we meet the minimum ADA in our district, and then the college dual enrollment courses are in addition and above beyond that.
Okay, thank you.
The one other thing that I wanted to add under credit by examination, number 1, students who qualify may challenge a required course. Currently, challenge exemptions are available for economics and health courses. Then my addition would be challenge examinations must reflect the actual curriculum covered in the course. And the reason I bring that up is that I know that a lot of students challenge the health class, and they challenge it with a district exam that is based on a textbook that is barely referred to in the health education class. And I feel like it's misleading to students and parents if they think that they know what they're missing by taking that class, or by taking that examination.
I agree with that. We have recently reviewed the health challenge exam and the economics challenge exam. The health challenge exam is missing one piece of SB 71 legislation, but other than that, it does cover the California standards and SB 71. So we are going to review that this month to update that particular piece of the legislation that's not covered. I think it's a bit misleading also to say that currently challenge exemptions are available for economics and health, although that's something that's standardly given. We do allow for challenge exams for all courses except English as per ed code.
Okay, then it sounds like we should simply delete that sentence. Students who qualify may challenge a required course, challenge examinations. Well, do we need to say challenge a required course as allowed by the district? Something like that?
As allowed by ed code.
As allowed by ed code.
Or as provided by Ed Code?
As provided by ed code. And
Just going to
delete,
say, we want to make sure that we're not going to allow that for some classes.
and I'm going to say by education code. as provided by Education Code, then delete the second sentence, and then follow with the challenge exams must reflect the actual curriculum covered.
Did you get that, Dr. Sarvis?
I have that.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
I can go back to 6115 now? Or is you?
Mine's super quick. On page 15, just a little mechanical thing. Cal SOAP. SOAP is actually capital since it's an acronym.
And the one other thing, I don't want to take any time on it now, but at some point, I know that we will be really reviewing the number of requirements that we have to graduate from high school, whether or not it's mandated in terms of only allowing students to take that number of classes or that number of units is a different story, but changing, lowering that number of 240 units to another more appropriate level is something I really think that we need to look at soon.
Along with future, on page 16, the 60 hours of graduation requirement for community service, worthy goal, worthy cause, probably very valuable, but from what I understand, the time and energy put into that may well go into other things that might be more beneficial in career guidance. I just wonder if it's still appropriate to have that requirement under today's budgetary situation. Just for discussion future.
Thank you. I know we would want to have a full discussion about that. Absolutely. All right. Are we ready to go back to 6115?
So 6115, what I was looking up is just where CSBA makes notes on their sample policies about what you can do. It's not comprehensive, but it is helpful sometimes. And what they note is that Education Code 52720 requires all schools to conduct patriotic exercises daily. Pursuant to Education Code 52720 and 52730, this requirement may be satisfied by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance and/or through other instruction described below, which includes things like promoting instruction that promotes understanding the concepts of pledge, etc. So they do use it.
In thinking about my correspondence with Robin, now that I think about it, she quoted policy to me, not Ed Code to me. So she reported this policy to me as justification,
Right.
not the Ed Code.
Well, I personally like the and/or piece, and since it reflects current practice, I think, and it seems to be working. I mean, from the schools that I've talked to and the individuals I've talked to, they like the process because it does give them some flexibility. So I would like the and/or.
So it would read
language.
and/or include instruction.
Mhm.
Right.
And it will keep the shall there and not.
That's what I've captured,
and not
anticipating
may.
that this is where this would end up.
I still would like to come back.
Well, we can bring that back for
Okay.
second reading.
Yes.
I only
Good.
had one more question in this section, and that was on page 46, and this is for Mr. Sumter. In the education for foster youth, it is, I think, probably one of the biggest changes in 6173.1, and that's around transportation for foster youth. In the past, it used to be required that a district provide transportation to and from the school of origin, and now it apparently is no longer required. And I just wanted to call that out, and it's because this is a big change from our not from previous practice, because I think that we actually didn't provide transportation, but it wasn't spelled out in policy, and I just wanted to know if you had taken a look at that.
Excuse me. No, not specifically at that. I did not.
Okay.
Are we currently spending significant money doing that? Or-
We have not been doing it, but it was required if it was requested. Let's put it that
Right,
way.
and I think that also arrangements were made if that previous school of attendance was in another district. We worked towards splitting the cost with that other district as well.
Okay, thank you. All right, do we have any other comments or suggestions in the 6,000 series? If not, then I will entertain a motion with the assumption that 6115 would come back for a second reading, but the others we might approve on this initial reading with the suggestions, amendments that we've made.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion passes. All right, we've got 5 more minutes for our, at least suggested time of adjournment. We can certainly keep going here if the group agrees to do that so that we can finish all of them. Is that, Mr. Heron, is that okay with you?
For sure, number D7, I'm not sure how long D8 will take, but D7 for sure, I think.
Okay, let's move to D7. Mr. Smith?
Actually, this policy is just pretty much reflective of law with respect to Prop 39 and the requirements that the board must comply with having a Prop 39 bond vis-a-vis not only disclosure, but also performance and financial audits on an independent annual basis. So,
Do board members have any questions on this one?
and actually, when I looked through it, it looks like most of it we've complied with without
think
even
so.
having the policy, so I was pretty happy when I went.
Looks pretty familiar, doesn't
Yeah.
it?
I'll move waiving of the second reading and approve AR 7214 general obligation bonds.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion passes. Well, we got through that one quickly. Let's look at D8.
These are board bylaws. One has been omitted. There are 4 that actually we're replacing with other statements. I can go through each of them. I would like you to note on the very first one, page 1, Board Bylaw 9140, bottom of the page, this statement about board representative to elect members of county committee on school district reorganization, or organization, excuse me, that at our annual meeting, we shall designate one board member as a representative to elect members to the county committee. And there was some confusion about that because Annette Cordero was elected to do that. Then they elected her to that committee, so we thought in the next go-around that we were electing her to the committee, and we're not, but this clarifies it.
And we don't need a alternate,
And we don't need an alternate, that's right.
so I'm out of a job.
I'm so sorry. Should we write in an alternate?
No.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that for us. Now it's in writing, and it's very clear, I'm sure. And we appreciate Mrs. Cordero serving in that role for us.
On the second one, conflict of interest, there is, in a different section, there's an attendant AR, which is a board resolution. We've passed a resolution on conflicts of interest, and we've designated the positions that have to submit conflict of interest statements. And of course, we change that every time we change from an assistant superintendent to a deputy superintendent, and every time we change from a director to an executive director. So we'll continue to keep that fresh and annually renew that. Under meeting conduct, page 8, board policy, or board bylaw 9323. This reflects our current procedures and what we have reflected at the beginning of each board meeting in our cover. We haven't visited any item in all of the board policies as often as this one.
There is a, no, go ahead.
Go ahead.
2 things, maybe you've caught this. The font size at the bottom of page 8 is suddenly smaller than the rest, or what precedes it. And actually,
okay.
that carries over. Maybe it was just to fit it on that page. I did have a question on number 5 on page 9. It says, "A person wishing to be heard by the board shall first be recognized by the president." That's not our common practice, is it? Or
Well,
Or
I
is
thought
it-
by having a speaker slip and the board recognition of that person.
okay, so that it's not the person who actually then calls the names who's recognizing them, but the board president as a general.
Yes.
introduction.
You could add "or designee."
By the board,
Board.
yes, president or designee. Would you
Yeah,
like to
let's do that. I'd like to have the words.
I'd like to
reflect
note in
practice.
passing that Eric Smith, who has to leave, is celebrating his birthday tomorrow.
Oh, I think we should all sing
birthday
happy
tomorrow.
birthday.
Happy birthday.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Happy
bye-bye.
Thank
birthday.
you.
On page 8,
I'm
Oh,
sorry, I need
okay.
to
Oh, okay.
capture that one. Where, was that item 5 on page 9?
Yes,
Susan?
by the president or designee.
Thank you.
And Mr. Herron, you had something on page 8?
just on page 8, there is a change in the abstention category. In fact, now it says quorum and extensions are put together, but in the past, it said, when a member abstains, his or her abstention shall be considered to concur with the action taken by the majority of those who vote.
Yes.
Whether affirmatively or negatively.
That is a change.
That has now been changed. It shall not be counted for purposes of determining whether majority or of the membership or the board has taken action. So it does. A person can now abstain for the real reason they're abstaining because they don't want to take a position, and it's not perceived to be for the winning side.
Right.
So that is a change there.
You're right, and that did cause some confusion previously, so I'm glad to see that.
And I'm just, what is the purpose of, the members have a duty to vote on issues before them?
Well, we've actually had this experience in the past where we had board members who would just sit out on items and it'd be sort of like wouldn't be a full no vote, but it wouldn't be.
Controversial issues.
They wouldn't do any vote, not even an
They would-
abstention?
No, they
just-
would abstain.
They would
Okay.
abstain.
They would abstain, and that would make them sound like they hadn't voted yes or no.
It was an easy
It was
pass.
an easy
Well, it
pass.
still is then. I mean, this doesn't change that.
One would hope that people would use abstentions for a conflict or a reason, other than the fact that it's difficult sometimes to make
It
a
was
hard
the
call.
D- rating.
Well, and
Okay.
also, I think it behooves the board president, when you have a controversial issue, if you have a board member who doesn't want to take that vote and is leaning towards an abstention, for the board president to remind the public that when a board member abstains from a vote, actually their vote is counting with the majority. And that has.
Not anymore. It's taken out.
That is taken out?
That's taken
Yes.
out.
Yes. That's what Mr.,
That's-
maybe you had
that's what I'm
stepped
pointing
out.
out.
Stepped out right
Mr.
at that
Herron
point.
was talking
Yeah,
about that.
that's what I'm taking out. On page 8, that's taken out if you compare it to.
Oh, I think, why is
Correct.
that
If you-
taken
if you
out?
I don't know.
If you
That's-
look at this paragraph right here, it says, "When a member abstains, his or her abstention shall not be counted for purposes of determining whether a majority of the membership of the board has taken action."
And we've gone over this with council and with CSBA, and that makes this obligation to vote, decide, even more important.
Because we have had it come up where we had to have an
Yes.
abstention count towards the vote.
Yes.
It's only happened, I think, one time since I've been on the board. But it was one where a supermajority was required for passage
Yes,
of something in
that's right.
particular.
That's right.
And,
Yeah, but it no longer says what you were thinking.
Well, and I just want to note that, that's one reason that people might abstain, but there is there's a conflict of interest, and you wouldn't want that vote to count either way, because if there's a stated conflict of interest, so.
what I've personally done when there's been a conflict of interest is to literally recuse myself. So I've stepped out of the room for the vote.
Which would be appropriate.
And right now, that's not what it says. If there is a legitimate conflict of interest, it does say that you can stay in the room and abstain.
The only time you have to leave the room is in a closed session.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I actually think it works the way it is in this new wording. I mean, there will be legitimate reasons why people may abstain, although I think the language that says, we encourage people not to do that makes sense, but I don't think if you abstain, your vote should necessarily then count as the majority vote.
Well, it was a really concrete way of discouraging that kind of behavior.
Yeah.
And I don't think there are any current members of the board that would behave that way, but it will happen again in the future. You'll have people that don't want to take a vote.
It was interesting to watch as an off topic, the city college talking about approving minutes. and they were 3-3, 3 yeses, 3 abstentions. And
Three
the-
abstentions.
And the chairman said, fine, it passes 6-0, because the abstentions count as yes votes.
I see.
And everybody challenged the heck out of him, and they postponed it for further, it took an hour just to approve minutes, to not approve minutes.
So, Dr. Sarps, are you saying that this new language was a result of a legal determination?
No, this was through CSBA.
So this is CSBA language, but then you asked the
Yeah,
district council?
this is CSBA. We went back through CSBA legal. We didn't go to Craig Price on this one. My understanding is that we did not go to him on this one. And I'd be happy to do that if you'd like me to.
I think that I would just like that double check that,
Okay?
and my one other piece on this one was on page 9. Under, in no event shall speaker be allowed to speak to more than 3 agenda items at a single meeting, excluding public comments before closed session. And, we put this in place for a very specific reason, because we were having so much disruption in our meetings, and this really has helped a lot. I now wonder why we are excluding the public comments before closed session as part of those 3. Because I haven't seen any purpose to it except for giving a speaker who's trying to be disruptive to have more opportunities and encouraging them to come to closed session and speak almost randomly on closed session items, just to have one more thing that they can talk about. And I don't know how other board members feel about that, but my preference would be to eliminate excluding public comments before closed session and just keep excluding statutory public hearings.
I actually would support that. I mean, I feel like there's abuse, and we don't want to punish the public in general for the abuses of a few, but I think at a minimum we could try it and see how that worked, and if we did find occurrences where there were legitimate reasons why members of the public needed 4 options as opposed to 3, we could reconsider it. But I actually support that. That's the first I thought of that, but I agree with that.
Well, and the only thing for me is, in my short time on the board, we have made exceptions for folks, and I would hate to adopt a policy that's made for a few when we've made exceptions for others.
Have we made exceptions for having people speak more than 3 times?
Yes,
I-
Lane.
'Cause
Once, and we took a vote on that.
Mhm.
So it wasn't an exception, we actually voted on it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I'll go with whatever the majority wants, and I'm okay with changing
Yeah.
either, but I just don't want to change a policy for.
Sure.
Well, and the key is to make sure we do catch it.
Right. And I also
No
want to
matter
say
who the person
that
is.
Right.
he had not in this particular case, he had not spoken before closed session. He ran out of his 3 in the main session. And so this wouldn't affect that. I mean, this is really, to me, about closed session, and, if somebody's going to come before closed session and then also need an additional 3, I really question that there would be any purpose, and I haven't seen it in 5 years.
I'll be happy to give that warning to Lane.
Well, Ed
Sorry,
caught it
Lane,
that
I
the
just
one
called you
time.
out.
Yeah.
So you're saying
At least he's usually brief.
He is,
Yes.
yes.
3 agenda items at a single meeting, excluding statutory public hearings at a single meeting?
I'm almost wondering if that second at a single meeting is redundant, and if we just left it at
Okay.
considered excluding statutory public hearings, period.
Okay.
And I'd just like to note, there is always the opportunity for, as a group, for us to make an exception. And sometimes we have multiple people up there, and they all want to talk, and they only have 3 minutes because they filled out one speaker slip, and we've certainly, accommodated that. I mean, the purpose is not to have a chilling effect from what we hear, but the purpose is to get legitimate feedback and utilize that in our decision-making process.
And I think we need to be consistent and very careful when we allow something to happen that's different. It can't be always yes to the same person or something and no to the same person all the time. It's got to be, I think we've got to be judicious in how we use that exception.
Absolutely.
Good point. Okay, any other comments, suggestions, remaining pages on 9323? Will we need to change the, I guess,
Do we want this one to come back because of that abstention issue?
Maybe we can come back for a second hearing.
Second.
So I'm going to move that we that we waive the second reading and delete and replace the board bylaws in the 9000 series as revised, except for board bylaw 9323, which will come back to us for a second hearing.
call the vote?
Oh,
All
I'll
those in fa-
second,
oh,
sorry,
sorry.
I'm sorry, I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion passes
Yeah,
unanimously.
one other thing that Kate, Mrs. Parker just sort of reminded me of, there were a lot of things deleted, and I don't know that every motion said approve and delete. Weren't there things in almost every section deleted that our motions never did include the deletions?
Well, let's see, the 6000s did not, well, I guess they were replaced, so that's not a deletion. I was
Okay.
pulling for the, let's see, were
Okay.
there any deletions? There were not in the 5000s or 6000s.
There definitely is one in the 9,000.
And we covered,
And it doesn't look like there were any in the 3000s.
Okay.
I think it was just the zeros and the, which I did definitely do a
yes, you did.
replacement.
Okay, thank you.
on this one.
Okay, so we have moved through all of these. Several will be coming back to us for a second reading. And I think that then we are ready to adjourn. Meeting is adjourned.